Hello, AP biologists. Mrs. Grider here to talk about ecological pyramids from your summer homework. I'm going to be talking about this packet right here. I want to warn you, I am not going to be covering the information that is in the first pages of writing about the different producers and consumers at those different trophic levels. I'm expecting that you can read that and understand that on your own. My goal is to clarify a little bit more about what ecological pyramids are and why we're talking about them in the first place. So by the end of what I'm talking about in this video, you should know what ecological pyramids show, what mass and energy are, and how they get transferred from different levels of the pyramid, why photosynthesis is so important, and how to calculate percentages for problems in the packet. Let's get started. So ecological pyramids in general show the transfer of matter and energy between trophic levels of an ecosystem. The trophic levels are the primary producers, primary consumers, secondary consumers, and tertiary consumers that you read about at the front of the packet. So the ecological pyramid is trying to show how much matter and energy gets transferred between the trophic levels. I want to break down those words a little bit just so we're all on the same page. Matter is anything that has mass and volume. In this case, it's the organisms in the ecosystem that are represented on the ecological pyramid, such as an oak tree. Energy is the capacity of matter and electromagnetic radiation to do work. It's a lot of fancy words. What that means is the energy that is contained in the organisms themselves and also electromagnetic radiation from the sun. We'll get into that a little bit later in the video. And lastly, when I throw out the word ecosystem, all I mean is a community of living organisms and their non-living environment in coexistence. So for example, if I'm talking about Lake Michigan, the ecosystem of Lake Michigan includes the plants, microorganisms, fish, other animals that live in the lake, that's the living organisms, and the non-living environment, the water, the nutrients that are floating in the water, the rocks at the bottom of the lake, and all of those things are coexisting together in the same space. That's an ecosystem. All right, so here's the pyramid that you see on the first page of the worksheets. So the ecological pyramid displays those trophic levels and it talks about some of the organisms in each of those trophic levels. So I've got labeled here on the side those trophic levels that it talked about in the first few pages of the packet and assigning them here to these particular organisms. So we've got our primary producers that do photosynthesis, primary consumers that eat the primary producers, secondary consumers that are eating the primary consumers, and tertiary consumers that are eating the secondary consumers. So when we look through the pyramid, we can see who gets eaten by whom. We can see that the oak tree leaves are eaten by the caterpillars, which gets eaten by the blue jays, which gets eaten by the hawk, right? So we're able to see a food chain up the pyramid. Organisms that get eaten transfer their mass and their energy to whatever does the eating. So when an oak tree gets eaten by a caterpillar, or an oak tree leaf gets eaten by a caterpillar, it's transferring its matter and energy to that caterpillar, and the caterpillar can use it to grow and to live. All right, I'm going to start by talking about energy because I think it's the more confusing of the two things, the matter and energy that we're talking about. So on an ecological pyramid, there are two kinds of energy that you can see. The first kind of energy is here at the bottom, and that is energy from sunlight that is hitting the Earth's surface. And this energy, this source of energy right here, is going to be passed up through the rest of the ecological pyramid, through the transfer of energy. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So we've got energy from the sun right here, and then here on the side, we've also got these other measurements of energy, and that is going to be chemical energy that's going to be transferred from one organism to another when it gets eaten. So this is not energy that's being created at any point in the pyramid. Energy is being transferred or passed along. So the sunlight hits the earth, it's transferred to the oak leaves. The oak leaves get eaten by the caterpillar and their energy gets transferred. The caterpillars get eaten by the blue jay, their energy gets transferred, etc., etc. And energy is always measured in kilocalories or joules, two measurements of energy that we have in science. I just wanted to point out that there is one pyramid in your packet which does not show, two pyramids I think, which do not show energy. These pyramids right here, they show mass, and I can tell because they are not measured in kilocalories or joules. The units are different. So this pyramid over here is showing the transfer of energy. This one is not. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what I mean by the transfer of energy through the pyramid. The most important thing that we have to talk about today in terms of energy is this process called photosynthesis, and it's done by primary producers, that first real level right here of our pyramid. Primary producers do this process called photosynthesis, and they take energy from the sun and they convert it into chemical energy that they store in glucose molecules. So all of the energy that we see in the ecological pyramid comes from this process. Because remember, these arrows don't show that we're making new energy. They're showing that energy is getting transferred up the chain by being eaten. So the energy from the oak leaves is going to the caterpillars, and that's how the energy is moving, not because the caterpillars made new energy. If you saw the video on the carbon cycle, I talked a little bit about photosynthesis, but we can see this carbon dioxide molecule right here has 6 carbon atoms, and when we combine that with water and energy from sunlight, we can make this molecule over here called glucose, which is the most important molecule that we have that contains carbon. And so this molecule is going to be used by the plant as a way to build itself up, to grow, and it's also going to be used as the plant for energy itself. So plants are using energy from the sun to make this glucose molecule. We can see the carbons right here, carbon, 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 that got transferred through. And the sun's energy that hit those plants is harnessed by the plants, and it's stored in this molecule. And energy gets stored in molecules in the bonds, in the connections between atoms. So these lines right here, they represent the bond. And so the energy from the sun gets stored right here in those chemical bonds. Energy is stored right here. Then later, the plant or the organisms that eat the plant can take that energy out again by breaking the bonds in glucose and using that energy to power the cell. So energy from the sun, stored in the bonds in glucose, and then later the glucose can be ripped apart in order to access that energy again and release it to power the cell. So thank a plant today for doing this amazing process, because it means that the energy is able to enter this food chain and this ecological pyramid. So I've got the equation for photosynthesis right here, a picture. We've got energy from the sun. We've got carbon dioxide from the equations going into our plant. Glucose is forming and oxygen is being released, just like it says up here in our chemical formula. And once again, the energy from the sun that the plant stores in glucose is going to be passed up the ecological pyramid when that plant gets eaten. All right, now I said I was going to talk about energy and also matter. So matter is also known as biomass in an ecosystem. So matter is anything that takes up space and volume, and in this case, the matter that's really important to us is the space and volume and mass of the plants and animals in the ecosystem. So the biomass that we're going to measure is going to be measured in grams per meters squared. So we've got our organisms, and over here we've got these numbers in grams per meter square. So what that unit means is the mass of all of the members of that species that you could find in an ecosystem that would be contained in 1 square meter of that ecosystem. So when we look at however big the forest that this pyramid is for is, in 1 square meter of forest, you can find 11,000 grams worth of an oak tree. In 1 square meter of forest, we could find 800 grams worth of caterpillar. Once we get into the higher levels of the ecological pyramid, they're really kind of taking an average of the total area. They're dividing the mass of all of the hawks in the forest divided by the total square meterage of the forest. But essentially, it's just measuring how much mass is there in a particular area. And we're measuring the mass of organisms. So this will be familiar to you if you saw the nutrient cycle video as well, but getting mass simply means that an organism added molecules to itself. It grew. You and I grow when we eat food, we add those molecules to ourselves, and we're able to get taller when we're younger, or later we can get wider when we add those molecules to ourselves. And just like all of the energy in our system came from the photosynthesis process of primary producers, so does almost all of the initial biomass in the system. Primary producers are doing photosynthesis to take carbon dioxide out of the air, water from the soil, which we can see right here in the picture, and using energy from the sun, they're making glucose and releasing oxygen. And that glucose that is stored in the plant is going to be the biomass of the plant. This process blows my mind every time I think about it, because what it means is that plants are taking literally molecules in the air and building themselves, growing by adding those molecules to themselves. It's pretty crazy. So when you see a tree or you see a plant, you're really seeing the product of lots of photosynthesis, lots of carbon dioxide coming in and being built into those glucose molecules. So that's how primary producers do this process. For those of us who are consumers, like humans and any other animal that's on planet Earth, we get mass when we eat food, and we take those molecules and those are able to be added to our bodies. So primary producers get their mass through photosynthesis. Consumers at all levels get mass through consumption of food. All right, that's the main explanation of these ecological pyramids. They're just a way for us to look at how matter and energy are transferred. If you understand how to calculate the percentages already, you didn't have a problem with the math, you're good, turn the video off. If you need a little bit of help doing the percentage problems that are in this packet, stay tuned for the next few slides so that I can give you some examples of how to do those problems. Okay, so the packet phrases these percentage questions in a variety of ways. They're asking what percentage of energy is absorbed, what percentage of energy is passed on, what percentage of energy is available. And all of these are calculated the same way. In your numerator of your fraction, we're going to have the energy that the trophic level in the question received. And then in the denominator, we'll get the energy from the source level that it's talking about, and then we multiply it by 100 for the percentage. Let me show you what that means. So I'm using question 5b in the packet as an example, and it asks, what percentage of the energy that was originally absorbed by oak leaves is passed on to the caterpillars? Okay, so I need the energy that the trophic level received divided by the energy from the source level times 100. So the trophic level that received energy in this case was the caterpillars. So I go back to my ecological pyramid, and I see that the caterpillars received 4,000 kilocalories of energy. So that's what goes in my numerator. And then the source level in this question were the oak leaves. It was asking how much energy do they get from the oak leaves. So I look at my pyramid right here, and the oak leaves had 25,500 kilocalories. So that goes here in my denominator. And I just punch that into my calculator, figure out the answer to the question. Now, if the question were a little bit different, instead if it asked what percentage of the energy from the sun is available to the caterpillars, I would have to do this a slightly different way. This is similar to questions 9 and 10 that are in the packet. So once again, it's the same basic principle, the energy that the trophic level received divided by the energy from the source level, but the levels that I'm talking about in the question have changed a little bit. It asks what percentage of the energy from the sun is available to the caterpillars. Okay, so that means I'm still looking at energy that the caterpillars get, but now my source level that it was talking about is the energy from the sun. So that's going to go in my denominator. So then I look back at the pyramid, 4,000 kilocalories that the caterpillars get, but there's 3,190,000 kilocalories from the sun, according to the pyramid. Once again, just punch it into the calculator, and that will give you your answer. All right, there's the end of the presentation. I hope that from this you are able to have your questions clarified. If you need anything else clarified for you, send me an email or a text. See you soon. Bye.